We are now recording. Thank you so much, Teresa.
Oh, you're welcome.
To the Safety Talk.
Yeah, and thank you all for coming. So Lower Columbia Canoe Club, that's my club. And what I learned when I came out here was that there are things that I had learned from guiding on the Chattooga River that most private paddlers just had never thought about or hadn't done as much as I had done. And so part of what I want to do in bringing together all these Chattooga guides to talk about safety topics is tap some of that immense amount of experience that comes from working full-time on the river. And just to name some names of the Chattooga guides that are going to be here. Some of you are already here. I see Bill Hester's already here from China. But we're also going to have Jim Wallace is here. Peter Benedict. Hobbit's not coming this time, sorry. Daryl Knudsen is already here. Ellie Bixler. Robin Kinnaird not here yet, but he's coming. And join Neily and Dee Kareken and Eric Neese said he would show up. I haven't seen him yet, but I hope to hear stories from all of you. And I have a pretty basic program planned. And then the main thing that I hope to see is lots of people telling stories about, lots of you Chattooga guide sorts telling stories about things that you've done. So overview of the subject. I'm going to start with what is scouting and then move on to why we scout and then think about when we want to scout. And then we'll go on to how to scout. And the last part and probably the longest part of this discussion will be mistakes, errors that you can make in scouting.
Have a good time.
Why am I still seeing these two names taking up the entire screen? Sad about that. But anyway, any of you Chattooga guide sorts want to pipe up and tell us about how you would define scouting on the river? Bill?
So can you hear me, Teresa? Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you.
So I've been thinking about this and scout long progression. It starts even before it's about a river, as much info as you can about it. What's the beta? Who's run it? What are the possible hazards? What's going on with it? Why is it interesting? And what do you need to know before you can go down? And so, you know, back in the day when there wasn't internet, it was all handwritten notes and people who had been before that you gathered whatever information you could. Now with the internet, you can see videos, you can talk and connect with people. But that's still just the beginning. It's once you're on the way, having a strategy of what you're going to do, what you expect. When you get there, it's what you're doing when you're car scouting, if you can, or just whatever information you can gather before you get on it, you know, and those conditions change all the time with water levels and storms and rapids changing and trees in certain places. So to me, scouting is this whole progression that begins when you're at home and then ends when hopefully you're at the bottom of the river and see how it went.
Right. Yeah. Joy, do you have more to add to that? Or any of you, just jump in, don't be shy. Just keep yourself unmuted even.
Hey, my name's Robin. I just remember a lot of scouting diagrams in the sand, and sticks and stones on the beach and stuff, and pushing around the stick to see what the theory is.
That's right. And Robin, what years were you a guide on the Chattooga, or were you purely a Whetstone photographer?
No, I guided from 80 to 87 for Southeastern expeditions, 86, 87. And then I was working for a couple different folks doing river photos for a few years after that. But then I would always count that as my residence and come back there. So that was my home in the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Glad you made it.
Well, thank you.
Let's see. Anybody else with a different definition of scouting?
And along with everything everybody said, picking the line you want, avoiding where you don't want to be. There's also the scouting of non-standard lines, finding the cool route, finding the more tricky route that's viable. A lot of rapids have those, so you can not only pick out your standard line if you want that, if it's on a rapid you haven't seen, yes, and then there's also alternate routes that you can look out for.
Chattooga line.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Teresa, I'll add something if I might.
Yeah.
So for me, scouting is an external, but also an internal exercise.
Mm.
And it's fundamentally centers on one question or one issue, which is gathering more information to decide whether and how to proceed
Mhm.
on the shore or in the middle.
Right? Like
And so for me, like, not to get, I mean, I could unpack this quite a bit, but for me, that involves asking three fundamental questions. One is, what's the line? Am I good enough to hit the line? What's the probability of me hitting the line? And what happens if I miss?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because sometimes it doesn't matter if you miss. And sometimes it does. And so, and some of those questions are internal and some of those are external. So it's not just the assessment of the obstacles and the way through, it's also assessing your own certainty of being able to do what you want to do and deciding if the risk is worth it based on the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And that applies to life, by the way.
Totally. Yeah, this
Right.
makes me think of Ellie's story, but go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's a really great topic because unless you're sort of doing instruction now, we tend to just follow somebody who already knows the line, and they will say something at the top of the rapid, we're going to boof left here and cut back right, watch out for this rock, there's a little FU thing there, whatever, and we follow them. And sometimes I don't even know what the rapid looks like until after I'm done and we get out, we wait for other people or something like that. I don't even know what I've run. And so, when I came up, scouting was a really integral part of what we did. And we seem to be kind of glossing over it a little bit more than we used to.
You're right there. Who's got the dog?
Let the dog go.
Joy.
Hey, I'll chime in if you're ready for that.
Yeah, do it.
My name is Peter. I guided on the Chattooga from 1991 to 1994. But the first time I ever paddled was on the West Fork of the Chattooga in 1979. I always refer to the Chattooga as kind of the mother river. I work out west in Colorado now, and I do a lot of instruction with a high school. And one of the things that I find super powerful about scouting with my students is that it gives them a chance to work on their water reading skills. And then they can say, oh, I think this wave is going to do that. And then they can test that. And then oftentimes they'll find that their reality might be a little bit different, or maybe they stick their line. But I find scouting is really important as an educational activity for helping them learn to read water.
Yeah, totally.
Hey, Teresa, I'll jump in. It's Patrick. Ain't you good to see you? It's been forever.
Hi, Patrick. Tell us
Hey,
what years you guided too.
Oh, okay. 89 to 89 on the Chattooga to, I don't know. I was hanging around there till 2004, but not full time. I took some years off in there, but paddling, got raft guiding to keep up my paddling habit. But I think one thing that was really drilled into us as Chattooga guides in the whitewater business was not just scouting for your run, it's for the weakest paddler in the group and establishing a safety protocol before anybody runs anything and thinking about the consequences, not only for yourself or the paddler, but it's where do we need safety? We've got crack downstream, or we're using, and that's just the prime example, depending on the different water conditions, thinking about the downstream obstacles, the proximity of the downstream river, the CFS, what are the consequences of an incident, a roll, a swim, and where do we need to set safety downstream? And so the team aspect of bringing that, and it was so ingrained into me that when I started running harder rivers, it was just second nature. And I think that was the benefit of going through that training program as a raft guide that I was able to employ as a paddler.
Mm-hmm.
Good call. Yep.
Yeah, totally.
I'll chime in on top of James. James, before you take that alternate fun route, I hope you tell everybody, don't follow me just blindly here. Maybe this might be something you want to think about.
Right. Yeah, if they were scouting too.
Yeah, but still the people's view of what you know might be different.
Correct.
We
yes.
should throw a lot of sticks in. Okay, see what happens goes here. Does that go where you want to go? That
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
We had one of the disadvantages of being a young paddler is you don't often get to choose exactly your crowd. You just sort of go with whoever will drive, and you end up with some odd combinations of people sometimes. And so you kind of like, well, how do I fit into here? Do I just follow blindly, or do I think about it? And we had one guy who used to joke and say, well, I can make it to there and I can swim from there. And it used to freak us all out. And it's like, that's not really the way I like to operate. So I'm more with you, Patrick. I like to just think about it a little bit in terms of how is it structured? What are you going to do? What's your run out? And what are the dangers downstream? Where do you set safety? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely it's supposed to be fun, and it's more fun if you're in the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they're scouting the whole rapid, the entire rapid as well.
Yeah.
From top to bottom. Don't forget to scout the bottom.
Right. And what Dee said about just sort of the modern culture not including a scouting component, that's part of what I'm hoping to address here, because we scout to make ourselves safe, right? The goal is safety, but it's also fun. When you scout, you can pick that alternative line. You can find that really cool booth that you never would have run if you hadn't looked first, right? Because a booth is a blind horizon. If you don't look at it from some other perspective first, you don't know it's a fun booth. But so, and then the being able to know where to set safety also depends. And then another thing you do when you're scouting is figure out where to portage. If you're not going to run it, where are you going to portage it? It matters, right? So scouting is scouting for routes on land as well as on water.
I also I've had many experiences where when I was scouting, especially in the early days, or if I'm kind of, nervous on the river, it's a chance to put feet on the ground and slow things down a little bit. It's a break.
Yep. Stretch out a little bit. And was it Bill or who was it that was saying, oh, it was Daryl that was talking about the internal sensations when you're scouting? I decide whether or not to run a rapid based on how I feel in my body when I'm scouting it. If I'm scouting it and I don't feel good, I'm not going to run it. But if I feel excited and I know I can nail it, of course I'm running it. So, and there's everywhere in between those.
And it can change.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of rapids I've run one day and won't run another, and I'll run it another day, and same water level.
Absolutely. It just depends on how you feel that day or whether or not you could find the toilet paper when you pulled up to shore, right?
Whether you can spit.
Thank you, William Neily. Teresa, are we going to talk about boat scouting at all? Because it might be worth defining briefly.
Well, yeah, I'd say that boat scouting and eddy scouting is part of scouting. So yeah, it's part of the definition. Tell us about it, Daryl.
Well, all right, I didn't know if it was coming up as a prompted question later, but
Not really.
yeah, so one thing on boat scouting is, which is super fun. Again, kind of basically by definition, it's when you are on a river that you're unfamiliar with and you are working your way down without getting out of your boat. And you can do this on pretty tough rivers. Like I boat scouted Upper Yacht with a crew. None of us had ever been on it. But I think if you are doing that, and this is relevant whether you think you're boat scouting or not, the critical thing that I always try to keep in mind is I always, no matter where I am, need to be able to see an eddy I can get to, from which I can get out of the river. And the reason for that is that otherwise you can go around a blind corner, you can go over a horizon line, and suddenly there could be some feature, whether it's a hard rapid or a log or whatever else, that you don't want to go into. So, or you could find yourself in an eddy because you did the first part of that. Oh, I see an eddy I can get to, but it's in the middle of the river and you can't get to the side from it and you're committed to a drop. So kind of keeping those things in mind, like if you're boat scouting, that's fine. You can get down Class 5 rivers boat scouting, some of them, but always making sure there's a place I know I can get to, not maybe I can get to, and I can get out from there if I need to.
Yeah, really good point.
Ideally more than one spot, but that depends on your skill level.
Yeah, it's one of my rules,
Okay.
scout from eddy to eddy.
There's a great, sorry, just to add a little color to that, there's a river up in Quebec called the Sataruski. It's in the Jacques Cartier Provincial Park. And I was talking to Chuck Curran, some of you might know who he is. And he ran it with his brothers, Willie, and I always forget, sorry, third guy. And there's this set of, it's mostly class 4 or 5, but there's this set of 3 waterfalls. The second of which I think is probably still unrunnable today. But the first of which is a nice 10-foot ledge. And one of them just went right off the thing. And the only eddy before this giant 60-foot curling, crazy death trap was about half an eddy long right at the lip, half a boat length long right at the lip. And you know, this Kern caught it and just waited there while his brother jumped out and pulled him out. But that's an example of not boat scouting well.
Yeah. Whoops. Well, I mean, if you're running 10 footers, a 10 footer's blind.
Well, they were Kerns.
Most likely. So have you guys done any YouTube scouting?
Oh yeah.
Does that count?
It does. It helps. Helps a lot.
Does until there's wood. You want to be careful. So I'm with you, Daryl. I look at a rapid and say, okay, if I can get to that rapid, it's maybe class 2 down to that eddy, and I can get out either to shore or to the next. And I kind of look at the horizon line. How much drop is there between the run out pool? You know, what can be there? Is it likely to be a series of steps that I can navigate, or is it just this big drop? Can I see the next bottom elevation? But I tend to take it apart like that too. Go down a little bit, decide again, maybe a touch more on the other side or whatever. But then after I can't see it, it's like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to walk it or look at it. We used to, I think some of the Chattooga folks used to go up to some of the feeder creeks up above the Overflow Creek, which was a fun one, but it does drop a bit. It drops about 400 feet a mile, and it's just drop after drop. And so we would go until we'd have to look, and every once in a while we'd go up and look at some drop, and we'd go, dang, there's a tree in it, gotta walk it. Oh shoot, maybe next year. And we'd hoof it around. But there's no shame in walking it, really. It is moment by moment and day by day as you feel it. And I have a hesitancy about people just blasting on through because they've done it so many times and they should be able to do it. Like, you really should pay attention to how you're feeling that day and whether you're on it or whether you can make that move or not.
Well,
it's supposed to be fun.
With the exception of singlies, you have to run that blind. It's a rule.
I had a funny story about singly. there's this, Alan Singley was the notorious mountain man, always famous for cruising around and bare feet and a wetsuit vest in the snow. I mean, the guy was just crazy, but he was always chugging on a big jug of moonshine. And his boating partner was Robin Saylor. And friends came back one day and said they were up there at some place and they encountered those two. And Robin Saylor was blasting away at the rapid with his pistol. And I was like, what? He goes, yeah, I can tell what's underneath there by how it splashes. Whatever, dude.
Do you think he could?
Knowing those two, I have no idea, but it wasn't a method that we adopted right away.
I'm sorry, Teresa. Maybe I'm taking too much time, but you're bringing up overflow. You're bringing up overflow, and it reminds me of another good reason to be able to boat scout and to be able to scout in general and read water. Because I only made it down overflow one time. It's hard to catch, and went with a guy who was a local. Snuffy was his name. Some of you might know.
Snuffy.
I know Snuffy.
And
Snuffy
took me
he
down
could not
overflow.
keep his left and right straight.
No, he
It might have
couldn't.
been because he was really baked, but he was leading us down and he kept saying, only go, okay, you must go left. If you go right, it's potholes, it's death, must go left. And we'd come up and I'd be like, really doesn't look good. And I'd go right and he was like, oh, I meant right.
Snuffy's dyslexic, you know.
He's
He's
terrifying.
Snuffy's dyslexic.
Well, there is a funny story about Singley going down Singley's Falls in a C1 that he'd made. And it turns out in the pool, there's a pothole, a big one, about an overgrown manhole size. And it was just big enough to stick the nose of the C1 down in there, and then just water pounded the thing until it broke apart and he swam out. And then he got back up and grabbed his jug and was like, oh, I want to do it again. It's like, okay. So definitely know who you're boating with and whether to follow their line exactly.
Right. So does that count as scouting the people?
Yeah. The soft skills of scouting. Huh?
The probe.
Yeah. But I didn't hear any YouTube scouting stories. Do you guys do that when you're going to a new river? Do you go on YouTube and look it up and watch a few head cam videos?
This is an older crowd.
It's really
helpful.
older. I definitely do that. I love to watch them.
That's great.
What's YouTube?
The danger is you get drawn into those beat down videos that you really don't want to see before you go on a trip, right?
Right.
I like to just watch Dane Jackson videos because he makes it look so easy.
Yep.
How about drones? Is anybody here
You
using
mentioned
drones?
YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And one of the things that when I'm paddle something new is trying to give the character of it. You know, it could be big water, it could be creaky, it could be drop pool, it could be continuous, but that's a really broad definition. Even continuous can be really busy or not that busy. You know, it could have fluffy and you can just blast through, or it could be pour over ledge over hole after ledge over hole, they're stacked close together. And so YouTube can give you a little bit of that idea. You had, boat scouting, car scouting, you're on the road, however close you can get, you're peering over the edge. And sometimes it can give you an idea of the character, and sometimes it can mislead you badly from that distance, depending on how far away you are. Had on the Maipo Valley in Chile,
100 or getting big.
and Shane and Bees.
Sure knows how to fix it.
Actually, about 30 years ago, this week, I think we were down there. And the Rio Yeso was one that we were car scouting. And we were, 500 meters away from the river. And we're looking at it and going, oh, great, that looks kind of Nantahala-ish, And so you're comparing it to Nantahala is, class 2 with one class 3. And anyway, we put on a kind of calm section at this bridge and we started down and we realized quickly that no, this was not like Nantahala at all. It was just constant pour over ledge. I just remember one scene was, Shane is getting rear-endered, I'm side surfing, and I look back upstream and Bees is getting back-endered out of a hole, and we're all going, oh my God, this is not what we expected at all. And so a kilometer or two down, we get to an eddy and we're all out of breath and we're like, okay, that was more than what we wanted or expected, So YouTube can only give you a little bit of an idea before you actually get there and look at it.
I also find that the point of view shots, the GoPro stuff and everything does not give me, and it could be related to my age or whatever. Oh, I'm sorry. I much prefer when I can see the rapid as opposed to just from the bow of the boat or from a helmet cam. Because I have no idea when I'm looking at those helmet cams, how big a drop might really be or how big those waves are. I can't really tell at all. But when I get, an aerial view or a long shot of something, it gives me a much better sense of what the conditions are.
Yeah, and I mean, especially with the GoPro videos, like the fisheye nature of the camera lens makes every rapid look a lot smaller than it actually is. So
Yes.
I think it might be like a good idea to watch a YouTube video to decide whether it's even in, your like skill level wheelhouse. But in terms of like watching a rapid being run on YouTube and thinking that qualifies you to route it, seems unwise to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we airplane scouted something in Costa Rica and vastly underestimated it the same way, Bill, you were talking about. Just like, oh yeah, okay, that looks okay. But we about got sick from the scouting because we're in this little plane bouncing around. It's stuffy in the plane, ironically, and everybody's got bad breath and we're leaning over each other to look out the window. And pretty soon it's like, oh, let's get that thing on the ground before I lose it. But yeah, you got to watch the perspective for sure. It's like Google Earth, right? If you look at Google Earth, you really can't get a sense of, or Street View, you can't get a sense of how steep a hill is. Same thing. That fisheye is really deceptive.
I have an
You don't
example.
know if it's going to pack a punch. You go through a wave. Is that going to be just a splash in the face, or is it going to really push on you?
Right.
When I've run some harder stuff unfamiliar using a topo map before going, either that or looking at it in a different season, or looking at photos of a rapid where if it's dam controlled, the water's off, or it's snow runoff, it's in the late summer and you have the low flow. So that changing conditions can show you what it's like when you are running it. And you can expect that, oh, there's an obstruction under there you'd never see with the water high.
It's true. Can you guys see this picture that I've put up?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a Wolf Creek Rapid on the Selway at about 6 feet. And this is an example of scouting from overhead. We're, up above the rapid by 40 or 50 feet. And can you see my cursor, my mouse?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, the line obviously is trying to stay out of this mess down here. So you're trying to go left the whole way down. And what I did not understand is that right here, this is where that huge rock is normally, but the water was so high, the rock was underwater. Coming over this hump and down here, this right here was the biggest wave I have ever run in my whole life. It was at least 3 strokes high. I mean, I was like paddling, still coming to the top of it. And I had no idea that was a big wave. And you can't even tell from this picture how big it is, but it was at least a 20-foot wave.
Wow.
So being up above a rapid really obscures it. And that head cam, just the fact that it's on top of your head is compressing the gradient some. And then the lack of perspective from the fisheye and also just from the narrowness of the view makes it really hard to see how big is that drop. And when you watch the YouTube videos of, the really good paddlers running stuff, and they turn back and you see how big it was, and it didn't look big at all when they were running it, that's a lesson. I never trust the YouTube video. How do I stop this share? There it is.
T, are you going to tee up the scouting from elevation, or I'm holding my story for the right moment? But
Oh, anytime.
okay, I thought we were still on definition of scouting.
Well, we've moved into why scout, when to scout. When do you scout? You scout whenever you don't know where you're going.
So this is actually interesting to hear from I'm not as familiar with all the GoPro stuff, but I was going to share a video from the other perspective, if I might, which was, I was on the Marañón River, which is the headwaters of the Amazon. Can you all see this?
Yes.
And this, I'm going to just start playing while I talk. So I had scouted from shore quite a bit up because it was the only way we could. And these waves look pretty small. And my plan was just to shoot across them over to River Right, punch through a couple curlers, and jump in the eddy and come out. This was on day 12, so I was feeling pretty good. But you'll see as we progress here, even with, I guess, the fisheye of the GoPro cam, it's way bigger than small. Waves, looked like they were, I mean, I knew they were bigger than they looked, but they looked like they were about 2 feet high, easy push over into a boily eddy. It gets better, so I'm going to let this play for a minute because everybody loves a video. But I'm gonna toggle, if I might, to another situation, which, yeah, it was, and by the way, these waves like wouldn't exist, and then suddenly they'd be these, like it's surfing you right there, and it didn't even exist as a whole before that.
Yeah, it's sloshing, it's pulsing on you.
Yeah, it was 80,000 CFS, and it's usually not. So,
oh no!
Yeah, this doesn't end well because this was not while I was a Chattooga guide. Anyway, the tiny little waves. But on a more serious note, I'll stop sharing. On a more serious note, an example of scouting from above that almost ended really badly was when I was back in college, so ancient history, and we were on the Blackwater River in New Hampshire. And right below the dam, there's a section, a little rapid, which isn't usually run. It's much harder than the rest of the river. And we were scouting it, and there was another group there too. And it almost resulted in a death, someone underestimating the size of a wave, because there were 3 channels, and the middle channel had a log across, kind of 2 rocks on it. And then the right channel was sort of unrunnable. And the move was you come down the middle and had to push left into the left channel, which was clear. And there was a diagonal wave, which was kind of angling back into the middle channel where the log was, but it really looked really small. It really did, because the only place to scout was from very, very high. And it was a class 3 river. So there were people there that weren't that used to it all. And my companions said, oh, it looks like it's about 6 inch to 1 inch, that micro curler that's angling back. You could just punch over it, but not sure if I want to because the water's pretty fast. And while we were scouting, someone from the other group went, and I remember saying, and I thought it was like 2 to 3 feet. I think it's higher than y'all think it is. And this person, not to make myself look good, but I did actually say that. And this person went right there, wasn't totally perpendicular on the curler, didn't have a lot of speed, and just typewritered right down into the middle channel and pinned heads up, thank God, across his chest, and was there for 15, 20 minutes before they could get the boat out and him out. And then I ran the rapid and nailed the line, which is a different sort of question about whether that was the right thing to do or not. But I was 22. So, but absolutely, that wave was 3 to 4 feet high, and it was totally doable if you were anticipating it. But from elevation, it looks so small. And that's just something to really, really keep in mind. I think I haven't done as much paddling as a lot of you up in the north, in the Portland area, but I have done some. And my recollection is there's just lots of rapids that you have to scout from pretty high because of the gorge-like nature of the rivers. So beware.
Yeah. Ellie, what about your story?
Just wanted an excuse to show that video of the headwaters.
Well, actually, I have one more question about that. What happened in the end? You swam?
No.
You got eaten by a crocodile?
No, if I'd left it playing, and because it's slow motion, it looks like I'm underwater for a heroic amount of time in black. I rolled up and then I got knocked down again. And then I rolled up again and I came out and I was like, I still got it. Because that was 2 years ago.
Man, it looked terrifying, especially that final clip before it went black. The river was just folding on you.
It was so big.
River looked chewy, man. It looked like it was chocolate.
It like, I think that river usually runs about 4,000. And we put on at 30 and it rose to 80 by the time we took off.
Yeah.
Well, that was 14 days, but still.
Yeah. So before we even, so we're already started into all the mistakes you can make when scouting, like scouting overhead, underestimating, overestimating, all these things. But the very first and worst mistake, I think, is not scouting at all. And we've all done it, right? We've all screwed up. We've all been like, well, they know where they're going. I'm just going to follow the gang. And then things can happen just because you didn't speak up, or you didn't, you put your trust in someone that maybe you shouldn't have. And so I'd like to hear a story or two about when you can only run it blind once. This is true. However, you don't have to. You can scout. And for those of us who prefer to be a little more conservative, it's up to us to assert that, right? Because nobody's going to do it for us. And I know that Ellie has recently moved to the Pacific Northwest from back east, and she was guiding for Southeastern, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Southeastern.
Yeah. And she's been finding her crews in the Pacific Northwest the hard way.
Yeah, trial and error is generally how it goes. But oh yeah, wait, do I?
Tell your story or whatever you want to say. I mean, it's a good story.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's only a good story because of like a series of poor decisions. But I recently moved out here, and there is a river, for those of you that are like from around, the Northwest, called the Santiam. And on like the upper section of the Santiam, it's like a class 3 run with like 2 larger rapids. And one of the larger rapids is called Niagara, and like the nature of the rapid is that there is like a class 3 intro to the run, and it's kind of like maybe 100 yards of waves and holes, and kind of like a little bit of a manky section where it's difficult to understand exactly where the rocks are and like where mistakes might be made. And then all of the water funnels into a canyon that's maybe 50 yards long. And the intro to the canyon is maybe 8 feet wide. And inside there, it's, like really horribly boily. I'm talking about the Niagara section of the Santiam. It's the North Santiam. Sorry, I still new to the area.
Yeah, it's okay.
So the Niagara section of the North Santiam, and the rapid is the rapid that the section is named after. But it all funnels into this like really swirly kind of boily, horrible area that is not generally super fun to swim. And I was with a new group of paddlers that I hadn't spent a lot of time with. And there are a lot of things about this rapid that are like very deterring when it comes to scouting. One is like it's a really long scout. And you would have to... Is anybody else hearing that?
Yeah, me too.
Anyway, it's a really long scout, and then the scouting would occur from a really high elevation, so that's another issue. And then the people I was with were convincing, like I mean, not convincing, but they had run it so many times that like for them the rapid was really easy, and it was like a really basic like intro. And they're right, it was, you know, it is like a class 3 lead in, but I you know, I chose not to scout it, and ended up having a really terrible time in the top half of the rapid. Like first hole that I hit, I'm upside down, and then I'm running, you know, rolling like repeatedly. And then in like the bottom of the rapid, there ended up being a log that none of us really like were aware of prior to, because it was, you know, just beyond the horizon line. And it wasn't really in an area that would be an issue if you were running the rapid correctly, which I was not. And I ended up like rolling up and seeing that I was going towards this log and swimming immediately. And then swam, you know, all the way through this like canyon, and ended up having a really surprisingly scary swim on a rapid that I went into blind without any fear whatsoever. And so it was kind of just like a surprising, you know, wake up call that you know, if I had just been a little bit less lazy and actually gotten out of my boat and like laid eyes on even the first half of the rapid, I would have actually had like a way more fun time. And yeah, would have been like way less stressed in the end. And I remember at the top I was like thinking about scouting it, and I was like, no, you know, like I'm gonna be really tired if I get out of my boat and walk around. And then I was way more tired after having swam the entire thing than I would have been if I had just gotten out and actually looked at it and understood like where I was going. But yeah, that's my not scouting story, my what not to do.
I have a picture of that slot. There's the slot she swam through.
Oh,
Yeah.
Actually,
that's it. But that's lower water, right? Than you had.
You know, I think that might be the I think that might be the other rapid on that run. I think that might be the Narrows, but I'm not.
No, this is the one called Niagara. The one
it is okay. I guess my perspective is just that's the back end of the slot, maybe.
Yeah, well, I'm looking upstream from scouting up on the rock.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, the perspective is like super confusing.
Yeah, I'm not down at boat level.
Yeah. So yeah, at the flow that I was on it, the flat water there was like a wave train.
Yeah.
Which really highlights how doable this rapid is.
Well, I mean, I would say that rapid that you call a class 3 that's up above that slot is at least a 3+.
that is, I mean, because there is like a pretty serious hazard right immediately afterwards if you.
And because it is long at the top. It's got either rocks or holes. I mean, it's got something going on.
Yeah.
Here's let me do it again. Here's one more picture of that from boater level. So that's the size of that little slot.
Yeah.
That's more like the water level that's definitely lower than the water level that you swam it at.
Yeah. And the the other thing is just if you did end up, you know, if your boat ended up going into, there are like a lot of areas where the water has like carved out little like cave structures in the wall sides, and so if your boat, you know, gets stuck in there, you're gonna have a really horrendous extraction time to get your gear back. So yeah.
Or even rolling.
Yeah, rolling would also be difficult. Thankfully, it didn't. Was already out of my boat by that point. So
yeah, thank you, Ellie. And what years were you on the Chattooga? You're a lot more recent than the most of us old folks.
Oh yeah, 2021 and 2020.
Woo!
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah,
it's still there.
It is. We're still doing it.
Yeah. Here's somebody else has a swim that swam in the same place. Underwater on an undercut for a long time. Yeah, that's the scary thing. It could kill you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that mindset of like, oh, it's just a class 3, it should be fine, I've been here before, is easy to get into. The low effect of like, There's no problem here. I was rafting with some friends, kayaking, and then they were in a raft on the Klickitat. And I was like, well, what can go wrong? It's a class 2-3, but it's continuous. There's no eddies. And we come around the bend and we're looking around going, well, I can't really see the run out, but let's just, kayaker, why don't you go ahead and take a look and just say something if it looks bad. And I was like, well, whatever, it's just a formal exercise. And I pop into a tiny little rock eddy on the right. But then I realized, oh crap, the bank has been undercut. A tree has fallen across the entire run and there's nowhere for the raft to get out. And they basically had to really scramble into the cobbles on one side and somebody jump out and wrestle the raft over the shore before they got pulled into that tree. So, I mean, it's really seductive, that same feeling of like, oh, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's just a class, whatever, right?
Complacency is just like when you get our age or my age, I've gotten to that point where I had become complacent because it's like, no, I got this. Because, I'm not paddling at the frequency I used to, and I can just kind of show up and blow up and and then I saw the movie Free Solo with Alex Honnold, and I was like, God, that's like just the one mistake, how serious that would be, makes me think. In kayaking, and then I had some swims too, where it's like, yep, complacency has kicked my ass. It's never just this or just that, or, oh, I've done this before. I don't know. It's just there's so much more to it, and you really have a much fuller experience if you can go to it each time anew, almost like meditation. It's not just like, oh, I've done this before. It keeps it fresh and exciting, keeps you young and alive. And then the other thing I'd say about scouting is when we watch the video of the headwaters or the feeder. Yeah. One thing you can't, like when you're in a river and the river's rising or whatever, and it's really hard sometimes to kind of see, wow, how much volume is here, or like, what does this volume mean in a gorge like this? And so when you get out and scout, then you see the topography, you see the way it's lashing against the bank, and not from the perspective of just occasional tip tops of the waves or whatever,
Yeah. I have a really intense story from pretty far back in my life along those lines about misjudging the size of a river. And Joy and Dee, who are on this call, were there. And I would love to hear either one of them tell the story. I'll start it. But it was 1992 and we were down in Chile. And we flew into Santiago and went up to the Maipo river drainage, and we were camped out by the Maipo. And it was high. It was really high. We were scared. We didn't run any of the Maipo. We were just looking at it going, no way. And so we started exploring up in the headwaters looking for something that was small enough to run. And we found a few things small enough to run, but the first thing we tried was the Rio Volcan. Joy or Dee, are you here?
Yeah.
Still?
Yeah.
You remember the Rio Volcan?
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, what I remember is scouting it and thinking it was about the size of the Ocoee.
Uh-huh.
I thought it was like maybe 1,200 CFS, not a big deal, didn't look too bad. Boy, were we wrong. I was wrong. What was your reminiscence on that?
But to connect with what Bill Hester said is that those guys paddled on the Maipo, and we looked at the Maipo and we're like, oh, that's way too big. And we didn't want to do anything like that. And so, so we went up, and there were so many things going on, some of which have been mentioned, but just like to give a little context. So like we were way high up above the river.
In the Andes.
In the Andes. And I wear hard contact lenses, and I had a bandana over my face most of the time anyway. And then we stopped, and all of a sudden I go from not seeing to looking out and just looking down and being already kind of in an irritated place. And also I was, of the four of us, I would say I was the least advanced paddler. I was up for doing stuff, but I think I was kind of deferring, but I was looking too. And I looked down, and it looked reasonable compared to the MIPO, which we saw up closer. So we're kind of having this, yeah, we want to paddle something, and oh, it looks smaller than that. And so many things were going on that we got to the river, and it was bigger than we imagined. And we put on, right? 4 of us, Teresa, D, aka Monk, Andrew Punzel, and myself. And we hopped on, and it got crazy really fast. I got back-endered.
The first rapid.
Came down from that. Andrew, things were going crazy for Andrew. Probably that's the way my brain worked at that time with kayaking. The second thing that happened to me after getting back-endered, then boom, I was out of my boat and swimming, clawing towards shore. Andrew was on the other side, tweaked his shoulder again. So here's the theme of like, when you already know, like a shoulder situation, you need to be more conservative. And so how that ended is that I ended up clambering out, literally clawing my way out on river right. Andrew, I think, ended up on river left. Teresa and Monk he had his boat somehow. Teresa and Monk ended up chasing my boat, and had the awareness to stop chasing it because things were too crazy. And then you want to tag in, Dee?
So it's for me, it was a very good lesson in enthusiasm. It was my first trip overseas for paddling. And as everybody said, we were not really interested in the MIPO. And so here was something that we could paddle, we can do this. And I was just so excited. And I remember putting on, and it sounded like horses running because the rocks on the bottom of the river were just being tumbled.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a shit show. It just exploded. And I remember chasing Joy's boat. And when we got out, Teresa, I remember stopping in about the only eddy that was barely an eddy and having to hang on to a branch to keep from getting pulled back downstream.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, the only thing it did for us was it really gave us a good excuse to drink a lot of Pisco.
That was such an intense, close call for all of us. Like Andrew and his shoulder, me getting to shore, you guys chasing my boat. Thank goodness you knew to stop. What we found out is that there was like, they called it like this death canyon down below, and that's where my boat ended up. And somebody found it a year or 2 or more later and ended up with my boat. And we ended up on 2 sides of the river and had to figure out how to reconnect. Like so many things went wrong, and it was such a close call for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we're lucky that we all made it out.
Yeah, I feel that.
Lesson learned.
Yeah. One more lesson I took from that was that when you're in an unfamiliar environment, like there were no trees up there. We're like above tree line in the Andes. We have nothing for scale, right? Completely new place, nothing for scale. We might have thought a little harder about how big are things, like that's just a 12,000 meter peak or whatever it is. The scale was different. The scale of the entire world was different. And now I know, now if I go a place like that, I'll be like getting right down to the water's edge and smelling it and listening to it before I get in my boat. And what I remember the most strongly is we launched in some relatively still water. I mean, it was moving, but it wasn't white water. And then when we came into the top of that first rapid, I think I was in the front and I heard it. I heard the sound, and it was that horses galloping. I could hear the rocks on the bottom, and I could just hear the pitch of it. And the pitch was really low, like it was a heavy water. And I knew it was bad. And I made a beeline for an eddy. And then nobody else caught the eddy.
We all caught the hole though.
Oh, well, yeah, live and learn. So that was a scale, like we missed it. And I was talking with Charlie Wabridge. You guys know who that is, right?
Yep.
I asked him, do you have any stories about scouting poorly and having a bad ending? And he's like, no, I don't have any stories. And I was like, well, I bow down to you, you know, a man with no stories, because I have tons of stories. And then he remembered one. It was the first time that he'd come out west, and he was paddling. Oh, now I can't think of the name. Oh, it was the South Fork of the Clearwater, and they actually launched on a run that was a lot bigger than they expected and had a fatality. You know, like it was a really rude awakening for him. So it happens. You have to really be careful with that scale question. How big is it? How big is it really?
Yes.
Yeah. Anybody
You know,
else?
I would say,
Sorry, go ahead, James, go ahead.
oh, and I wish Hobbit was here to help, because he was on the same canyon trip. It was his trip. We were late in the day, and this goes back to the complacency and tiredness. Late in the day, we were ready for camp, and we get to Upset Rapid on the canyon, and there's a lot of libations going on, and everybody's having fun, and we pull over to scout Upset, but nobody thought to look at the bottom where there's this giant hole in the middle, and 2 rafts flip, and another raft had 3 out of 5 swimmers out of it.
Oh,
And
man.
lost a lot of beer. So luckily that was all. But yeah, always scout the whole rapid, and don't be too anxious to get to camp, and always have some element of control when you run the big rapid.
You know, I might share just real quick. I was fortunate when I was younger that I had a good brush with mentors, good mentors. And one of them was a guy who had gone to Switzerland on a botany scholarship to study the wildflowers, the alpine wildflowers. And so it was an excuse for him to climb. And he came back from there after a scary but okay ice climbing fall. And he came back a changed man, and he said, all right, from now on, my name is the Marshmallow Mountaineer. Not after the hair. It's just got to be pretty. That's all it is. It's got to be pretty. And at first I bridled at that, you know, as a youngster, it's like, go give me the hair. But I kind of kept with it. And actually it's guided me well as far as like, you know, it's supposed to be fun here, gang. I just want to have fun. And it's got to be pretty. And so now I just focus on that. And if it's a pretty run, I'm happy with a class 3-4. I'm fine with that. Let's just play and have a great time. Yeah. But I was fortunate that I had him in my ear instead of some of the other folks who were just like, okay, we're going to go for the hair no matter what.
Well, for some people, they're in that place, right? Like the hair is not hairy to them. And I have a bunch of friends that are in that place right now, and it's not a big deal. And there are days when I will run all the rapids on the Sandy Gorge and not think a thing of it. And other days when I'll portage 3 times. And it's okay, either way. You get to decide for yourself.
It is okay. And it's okay, just enjoy it for the fun. You know, I'm just going to say it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that I was on the canyon in October, and I was in a raft this time, again, because I hadn't been kayaking. And I was happy to be in a raft. Actually, somebody else was rowing. It was Wags, if anybody knows Wags, Outward Bound dude. I'm here in Western North Carolina. But we were at Upset, and it was the only rapid that I walked around. And the reason that happened is because I have a low blood sugar situation, and I felt myself kind of crashing. Mm-hmm. And then in my head, I heard Dee saying, Dee was not on the trip, said, you can walk around any rapid. And it hadn't even occurred to walk around any of the rapids. It was kind of on the lower side of things. But anyway, I hadn't been on the canyon since the 90s. And so I got myself a snack first thing. So it's like, take care of what do I need in order to have clear thinking. I needed food. And so I walked part of the way down and I'm eating my Cliff Bar and drinking my water. And the people, everybody else who scouted, they did walk all the way down and they stared at that freaking hole for 20 minutes. And my brain went off like, you don't stare at something that you don't want to hit that long. Either you get on with walking around, or if you find another line, whatever you need to do. And that cemented it for me. I was like, I'm not running this rapid if they're staring at it that long. And so I walked around and was able to take pictures and have fun watching. And, you know, everybody went through just fine, hit the line over on the left. And a little part of me was like, oh, I should have run it. That looked like fun. But it was what I needed. Like you talked about, like, that's what I needed at that time, because things were adding up for me. For sure.
Yeah,
That reminds me of the quote we should probably, there's two quotes from William Neily we should probably share.
Yes.
Well, one is that the amount of time you spend looking at a hole is proportional to the amount of time you'll spend in the hole. And the other was something like, if you can't spit, someone referenced this earlier.
Yeah.
If while scouting you realize you can't spit, then you should walk.
Yes. I agree with that. And actually, I want to circle back around to upset and you know that hole at the bottom. Yes. And so many rapids have like something that's way down there that you can't really see. And if you just get out of your boat and you look at the top 3/4 of the rapid, you're not going to see it. And it's easy to just ignore those things. I've done it myself. I was on the Illinois River here in Oregon on a self-support trip with 2 of my buddies, and we got out to scout it. And I was standing up on a tall rock looking at the very last horizon, being like, that looks like a bad hole. It was about 1200 CFS, which is when that bottom hole on the Greenwall Rapid gets serious. And one of the guys didn't see it at all. And he just went back to his boat and got in it and was going to run it. And he ran down there while I was walking back towards my boat and swam out. And this is self-support. So it's a kayak with all your gear in it and he's swimming. So we ran, both of us, followed him down there without having picked a line, because we were chasing the guy that was swimming in his boat full of gear. And we all spent time in that hole. My spray skirt popped out, so I went underneath it and came up and rolled up, but then I was totally full of water. But that was dumb, you know? I don't know how to fix it. Dumb is hard to fix, but hey, Deborah.
Hi. I'm loving all the comments, and I don't know if we really want to end on dumb is hard to fix, but but it is time to end. And so much of what was discussed actually sets you up so nicely, Teresa, for the next talk, which is on, heuristics, right? And the human factor, and it's all related, right? Like none of these safety topics can be taken in isolation. They all work together really well. It's not the first LCCC safety talk with the gang from the Southeast, unless I make a mistake. And I did make another mistake this time.
Yay! Awesome. What happened?
This one's slightly more easily fixed, but apparently when the LCCC set up this brand new Zoom account, we inadvertently limited participant size to 100. So there were a fair number of folks that were trying to get into tonight's Zoom who were not able to get in.
I'm so
but
sorry.
We recorded it. So I've replaced one mistake for another. And we can get folks, so if you have friends who've been texting you saying, how come you're in? I can't get in. The answer is Deborah made a mistake. And but we can fix it, because if they were trying to get in, we have their email address, and so we will send folks the recording from tonight, and we will invite all of you to join us again in 2 weeks for the next safety talk, which will be maximum participants 300. Well, let's see if that's a problem, and if it is, then wow, that's extraordinary. Teresa, do you have any final thoughts or things that you would like to say before we say goodnight?
Nothing other than my apologies. I turned it off. If you were trying to text me because you couldn't get into the call, I'm sorry.
Yeah. You can just,
It was blowing up and I was like, I can't concentrate.
yeah, no, it's all my fault.
But yeah, that was terrific. Thank you all for coming. Great discussion. Yeah.
Super fun. Thanks for having us here.
Yeah.
Hope it was useful.
I'm sure it was.
Always.
Yeah.
It was certainly fun for me.
Oh, enjoy. I was on the Colorado River in October as well. We launched October 6th, and the only issue we had was that upset rapid.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, we launched on the 4th.
Oh, you are, yeah, right ahead of us.
Yeah, I keep encountering people who are one side or the other. Yeah.
Yep.
Weather was awesome, wasn't it? Sweet.
Yeah, it's
Great
wonderful.
Right.
Sorry, I just want to say hi, Joy. Hi, Monk.
Hi, Daryl.
Hi, everybody. Love you.
This was fabulous.
I'm seeing y'all in 25 years.
Yeah. Oh, and the last
next
one,
year.
the very last one of a safety series is specifically about Grand Canyon.
That's right.
And we are going to talk about upset, by golly.
Oh, and I've got a great video for you, Teresa. We have video of the raft going into the hole.
Yeah, bring it.
Okay.
That's awesome. I've got some great guests lined up. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.